lots of children, so I think you're really going to enjoy this one. There are 6 owls, 6 boxes, 6 owls. The smallest owl weighs 0.4 pounds. I didn't know they came that small until I started investigating owls. So, with us today we have Marcia and Mark Wilson. They've been doing this bird and biology and owl thing for many, many years. They both have biology degrees, and they're going to do a wonderful program for us today. So I just want to do another couple of housekeeping things. The aisle is clear. Okay, folks, in the back, we have the aisle clear. Okay, in case someone has to get out in an emergency. And if there are any animals in the room, we can't have them in here with the birds, okay? I'm sorry.
How about us? We're all animals.
No, you're not.
We sure are.
Okay, so any animals, please take them outside.
That's the sound of an owl that lives right around us. Maybe a sound you've heard back in the woods. But if you woke up in the middle of the night and you heard that, what kind of an owl is it? Who said great horn? All right, it's a great horn owl, absolutely. I want to thank Claire for setting all of this up here today, and thank all of you for coming out. And I am on the verge of losing my voice.
But you can still hoot, right?
I can still hoot.
That's good, because I can talk, but I can't hoot so well. So we're a couple, Mark and Marcia Wilson. We brought 7 birds here for you to meet today. 6 of them are owls. 1 of them is a mystery bird. And we'll see if anybody can recognize the mystery bird when we bring it out. And it's a bird that would nest right here in Groveland or Oxford or anywhere in this area. And we're going to introduce you to your neighbors, because most of these owls that you see here today, in fact all of them except for this one, are regulars in this area. And you can hear them tonight when you go home, or maybe see them if you're lucky. We're going to help you figure out who your neighbors are.
Right, and I got to share with you, for years we went to the Bagnall School for grade 5. Now, if there are any 5th graders or former 5th graders here, perhaps you're an adult by now, but I think we went there for 12 years straight in a row. But we also do these public programs, obviously.
Yeah, so Marcia's going to be handling the birds. These are not our pets. These are wild animals, so they have very sharp claws called what? Talons, right. And they have powerful feet. Now, they will be attached to Marcia. She will be holding on to their jesses, their leather jesses, which are straps that go around their ankles. So the birds won't be flying around the room. They're not going to be landing on your head. You don't need to worry about that. You might notice we do have some mats down. The birds will be going poop. And we call it whitewash, and I'll be cleaning it up, but you don't want to be sitting on the mat, because if you're underneath an owl like this young guy in the blue coat, what can happen? They can poop on your head or in your popcorn. So you might want to move over, buddy, because you're in the poop zone. I can't stress that enough. They will poop. I guarantee it. It's one of the few things in life I can guarantee the owls will go. And sometimes it's a lot. So you're warned. We're going to start with the little guys, and you know, we have to have federal and state permits to keep these owls. We have to have permits from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, from Mass Wildlife, and from any state we go into. And we've been doing these programs for 25 years. In fact, Marcia is so good at hooting because she was raised by owls. Her parents did wildlife rehab, and she grew up with a great horned owl that turned out to be 43 and a half years old.
Wow.
And we have a great horned owl today that you're going to meet, along with some other owls. And Marcia, as I mentioned, will be handling them. I'll be on poop patrol. And we will take questions as we go along.
Right, once we have the birds out, and I wasn't paying attention, did you mention that we really focus on our local wildlife?
Yep, we mentioned their neighbors.
Okay,
Yep.
so, it's fine to know about wildlife around the world, but you really ought to know what's in your own backyard.
And so, I can do this, Marcia.
Okay.
We're going to start with the little guys, and the first owls to come out are going to be one of the most common owl in this area, and I bet 90% of you have never seen one. It's called an eastern screech owl. And they come in two colors. They come in gray and a rusty brown, or red as it's sometimes called. And screech owls are really common in this area, but they're hard to see. They're mostly nocturnal, so you won't see them flying around during the day. And these are not babies. These are full grown. This is as big as they'll ever get. So there's the gray one. And then here we have the rusty brown or red one. So, the gray one here, if we're quiet, we might hear the gray one. She has a comment, so let's see what she has to say. You happy to be here? Do you like Groveland? Or Groveton? Or Grove anything? Well, screech owls have a poor name. Whoever named them really didn't do their homework because they don't really screech. They more sound like a little pony or a little horse when they call. So Marcia, how does that call
Right,
go?
they kind of sound like... I need a volunteer who can come up and help us with that call. How about young lady in the pink? Come on up.
Come on up. All right. So let her through there. And you can stand right in front of Marcia. Right in front. Right there. And turn around, face your audience. And what's your name?
Abby.
Okay, Abby, have you ever heard or seen a screech owl before?
No.
Okay, well, Abby, they're a fun call to do. You probably know what a little pony would sound like, a little horse. That's
Yeah.
kind of what it sounds like.
And we're just
Marcia,
going
how does it go?
to surround you with screech owls here.
And one of them's staring at Abby.
Yep.
So, how does it go again, Marcia? You ready to try that, Abby?
Very good.
How about some silent applause for Abby?
Silent applause.
Yeah, real clapping's kind of loud. Abby, you did a great job. Thanks for coming up.
Yeah.
And hearing an owl is often the best way to find out if you have one in the neighborhood. Screech owls will call this time of year, and if you hear this little trilling call or this little pony call, you have one in your neighborhood. They don't carry a long distance. The call, you only hear it if you're fairly close to the owl. Now Marcia will walk a short ways down the aisle. You'll notice that screech owls have ear tufts on their head. They have these pointy feathers on the top of their head. But are they ears? No, their ears are right behind their eyes. So those ear tufts are more for camouflage or for maybe mood expression. They don't help the owl hear that we know of. Now, these are pretty small owls. How much do you think a screech owl would weigh? Any guesses? Raise your hand if you have a guess. What do you say? 2 pounds? Fair guess, but it's way too much. What do you think? Half a pound is pretty close. They're about 5 to 6 ounces. So they're covered with what? Lightweight feathers. But birds have bones that are adapted for strength and light weight. You think their bones are solid or filled with a lot of air? Filled with a lot of air. They're hollow, yeah, partly hollow. And so they have strong feathers, strong bones, to help them fly, and yet they're not heavy. Now, these little guys eat a lot of mice, a lot of insects. They're mostly nocturnal. And people always ask me, how can I attract owls to my yard? One of the ways is to attract mice to your yard. That's usually a popular suggestion.
I bet a lot of you have bird feeders. Raise your hand if you have bird feeders.
Well, if you have a bird feeder, you're probably already attracting mice to your yard. So at night, there's a whole night shift of animals coming into your bird feeders. Flying squirrels, mice, voles, maybe rats, maybe skunks,
Raccoon.
red fox, raccoon, a possum, maybe even a black bear coming in and eating your bird seed. And then who might eat some of those animals?
Owls.
Owls. Now, of course, an
Right.
owl won't eat a black bear, but they sure could take an opossum, a raccoon, a skunk, a bull, or any of those other rodents that I named, flying squirrels.
Right.
Of course, the screech owls won't take a raccoon, but a big great horned owl could take a raccoon. All right, now I'm curious, I'm going to poll the audience. How many of you have either seen or heard a screech owl? Okay, more hands than I expected.
They're around.
How many have had them in their yard? That's great. How many of you have put up a birdhouse for them? Well, those of you that had your hands up on the previous questions, you might want to consider putting up some housing for screech owls. They're one of the owls that regularly will use a birdhouse to sleep in or to nest in. Pretty easy to make, 6 pieces of wood. You can get free plans online. Just Google screech owl birdhouse. And you might want to put up 2, because usually squirrels move into one of them, right? And you often will have pretty good odds of getting a tenant in these houses, considering how much housing is going for in this area, right? You can build one of these for about $10 in scrap lumber, and that's pretty good. So it's only 6 pieces of wood. If you have a saw and a screwdriver, you can make one.
Right.
Pretty easy.
And why not add a few more artificial cavities, because normally the screech owls would want to live in holes in trees, also called cavities. And so if you've got a limb with a hole in it, if it's not bothering anybody, leave it there. Or a dead tree with holes in it. You know, it's like a condominium for wildlife. Mark, we have a question right here.
Okay, yes. What's your question?
So, sometimes they stare at each other like they're in love.
Oh, that's romantic, yeah. The thing is,
They do live together.
they do live together, so they probably don't mind being near each other.
Right,
We
right.
think they're both females. These guys came to us from Maryland. They were part of a U.S. Fish and Wildlife study to see if West Nile virus was passed on from adults to babies. So when that study ended, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had 80 some odd screech owls that needed placement. So we drove down the New Jersey Turnpike in our van. We picked up 4 screech owls, and you're seeing 2 of them here. This was about 4 months ago that we picked them up. And they'll live with us their whole lives. They can live, I think, in captivity up until almost 20. We don't actually, how old are they, Marcia, do we know?
They're 3.5 years old.
Okay, so they could live a good long time. In the wild, they probably live about 5, 6, 7 years, but big owls can prey on small owls. So a barred owl or a great horned owl could easily catch a screech owl, which explains why they're so good at hiding during the day. If we wanted to, could we let them back into the wild? That's a great question. The answer is no. They were hatched in captivity, and as part of the permitting process, it was stipulated these could not be released back to the wild. So they're not injured physically, but they're non-releasable for other reasons.
Right, because they're too habituated to being around people.
Yeah.
Now, talking about cavities, Mark, I think it's time to meet the mystery bird.
Okay.
Because the mystery bird also uses cavities and also uses the same kind of hunting grounds as the screech owls, but at different times of day.
Still working.
Yeah, okay. So I bet somebody in the audience will know what this bird is. Raise your hand if you know what it is.
What do you think?
I forgot.
What do you think? You nailed it. She said a kestrel.
All right.
It's a small falcon. It is a falcon. I heard someone say falcon. You'll see how pointed the wings are. One of the field marks of a falcon are the pointed wings. And this is our smallest falcon. You're probably more familiar with peregrine falcon, which is a lot bigger than this. But this is an American kestrel. And it eats the same things that screech owls eat. It would eat insects and mice, maybe small snake occasionally or a small frog. But they eat a lot of the same things. And the kestrel's about 4 ounces Screech owl is a little heavier at 5 to 6 ounces.
But look at the shape. Even if you didn't know what the kestrel was, you could tell it's not an owl, right? Because owls have big looking heads.
Big heads as wide as their bodies.
Yeah.
Hawks, eagles, falcons have smaller heads on big bodies. So you can tell by the shape that it's not an owl.
Now, Mark, when we were approaching Beasley Park, I noticed a beautiful orchard on the right. And orchards actually occasionally do have natural cavities that are used.
Particularly older orchards
Right.
are ones that have maybe been not used recently.
Yeah.
So they become meccas for wildlife. If they're, an abandoned orchard is fabulous for screech owls and kestrels.
Right.
We have a question here. Nice and loud. How did we get the snowy owl? I'll tell you when you bring him out. I'll explain how we got him, because it's an interesting story. Yeah, yes, question back here. Nice and loud. I'm totally not hearing him. You have a bird feeder? And a squirrel jumped on it? And what happened? It closes. Ah, so the bar is closed to the squirrels, huh? Yeah, those are those fancy feeders that are counterweighted, so when a squirrel jumps on, they get shut. They're pretty tricky. All right, I'm going to get a question back here. Excuse me. All right, question here.
What does the kestrel eat?
Kestrel eats mice and insects. She loves dragonflies, so I give her dragonflies in the summer. And she'll eat. We feed the mice that we buy. They're farm-raised mice. They're not wild mice. So we don't feed wild mice for the fact that they might have poison in them. And the mice we feed them are farm-raised. I like to say they're free-range vegan mice. But they're very clean, very healthy. And that's why we don't feed wild mice.
And when you think about it, you never know if your neighbor's putting out decon or mouse poison, so that's why we buy mice. We want to make sure that they're clean, and that's actually a very good way that you can help to prey and other wildlife around you, right, Mark? Is to not use mouse poison.
Yeah, so say you have a rat or mouse in the house you need to get rid of. And sooner or later we all do. Better to use a snap trap to catch it than to use poison. And I'll tell you what a great bait for snap traps is. It's peanut butter. So if you bait that little trap with peanut butter, it kills the mouse right away. It doesn't poison anybody, doesn't poison a pet, doesn't poison a coyote or a fox or a kestrel or a screech owl, and you get rid of the mouse. All right, I'm going to tuck her back in. We're going to meet a bigger owl.
Yeah. But first, Mark fed the owls last night after I went to bed. And what did he feed them? Mice, yeah. So by this time of day, the owls perhaps will have coughed up this lovely thing.
Oh, what's that called? Anybody know?
What's it called?
You may have taken one apart in
Young lady
third
over
grade.
there. Young lady over there.
Owlet?
A pellet, an owl pellet. So if you took this apart, it would have the complete skeleton of a mouse, including the skull. How many of you have taken apart a pellet? Look at all the hands. Those of you that didn't raise your hand, it's a fun thing to do, to take apart an owl pellet.
Right, so that owl pellet is all that's left from last night's mice from the barred owl. This is not a barn owl, it's a barred owl. Now, the barred owl gets its name from the bars that run from shoulder to shoulder. These are stripes down here. And I bet a lot of you have, must be a dead spot there. I bet a lot of you have heard of barred owl. They go, how many of you have ever heard that? Okay. We volunteer to come up and help us with that call. Let's see. Oh, a young lady right here. Come on up.
Okay, she's making her way through. She's going to come right through right here. Come on, you can do it. Here.
Here we go.
There you go. All right. Now, what's your name?
Sammy.
Sammy? Okay, Sammy, you can stand right next to Marcia. And the barred owl is a really fun call to do, Sammy, because they sound like monkeys in the woods. And so if you think you have monkeys out behind where you live, you're hearing barred owls.
Yeah, because besides, do we have monkeys around here?
Not usually.
No, not usually. No.
Not usually. Unless they escape from the zoo.
Now, it's 8-note call. that
8-note call.
If you memorize, who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? It matches, woo, 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 woo. And we're not making this up. You know, my mom taught me this when I was 6 years old. Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all? So I'll do the owl's call and you can do it. Very good, but you're not done yet because sometimes they skip the first few notes and then they just do the woo-all.
Head up.
Woo-all.
One
Woo-all.
more time.
All right, nice.
Silent applause for Sammy.
Okay.
Sammy, you can make your way back to your seat there.
Now, part of the reason that we enjoy sharing these hooting lessons is because, and maybe some of you have tried this, if you hear an owl, if you copy the sound and hoot back to them, they might answer you. Have any of you ever tried that? All right.
A few people, okay.
Yeah.
And, you know, we don't really care what the neighbors think when you do it, right? It's
No.
okay to go out on the back deck and hoot. And you can often get a response, particularly if you've never done it before and the owl is new to you. But once they learn that it's you making the call, they quickly get the idea that it's a human and not a person. Now, Marsha, if you hold this bird up for a second, we can all see that she's missing something. What's she missing? A wing. Here's what happened. Up in New Hampshire, almost 20 years ago, she got hit by a car as she flew across the road. And they rushed her to Concord, New Hampshire Animal Hospital. Someone found her by the side of the road, you know, unable to fly. She had a badly shattered right wing. And at the animal hospital, they made the decision that the wing was not savable, so they had to take it off. So she had an amputation, and will she grow that wing back? Unfortunately not. So that's the bad news. She won't grow it back. She's not flighted, but she's almost 20 years old. And the good news is she does have a boyfriend, and he can't fly either. He was also hit by a car in New Hampshire. Different place, different time. He's only 3 or 4 years old. We don't actually know his age.
Yeah, but she doesn't care.
Yeah.
And neither does he.
And you know, for 17 or 18 years, she lived with another boyfriend, but he eventually passed away. And he too had been hit by a car. So barred owls, even here in this area, get hit by cars a lot. If you find an injured owl, you're probably wondering, well, what do I do? The best thing is to call your animal control person, or sometimes the police will know who that is, and usually they'll try to get the bird to a wildlife rehabilitator or animal hospital for treatment. If you're picking up an injured owl, here's how to do it. Hopefully you have a cardboard box available, but if you don't, you can use your trunk of the car. You have a towel or a blanket or a coat that you can scoop the bird up. And you watch out for the legs and the feet, because that's the part that could grab you. You do not want to be grabbed by an owl, because they won't let go. And they have big, powerful feet with sharp talons, and the owl will sink those talons right into your hand if it's given a chance. So, keep the feet away from your body, away from your hands, get the bird into the box or into your trunk, and then get it to a rehabber for help. And you'll save that bird's life, most likely.
Now, when you look at owls' faces, you'll notice a circle around each eye. Those help the owl hear, because after all, the ear openings on birds are right on the side of their head. Right now, I've got my finger in her right ear.
It tickles.
You can pretend that you're hearing like an owl with a simple demonstration.
Well, take your hands, palms forward, and then cup them, and then put them behind your ears, and then point your nose at me, and you'll see you're hearing very well. And then if you like turn your head around to another direction, you're not hearing the same noise. It's less directional, so you can really zero in on sound, much like an owl does, by using your hands as facial discs. That's what those special feathers are on the owl's face. They're called facial discs. And they focus the sound into the ear. And that's how they can pick up the small noises of mice and other small animals. They can catch things on hearing alone. Don't need eyesight necessarily. Question there. Come over to the mic so I can hear you.
Say it again. Lean in, lean in.
My dad rescued an owl from the car.
Your dad rescued an owl from the hood of a car. Was it stuck in the grill? In the motor? What kind of owl? A screech owl? Under the hood? That was his father? Oh, what town was that? Salem, New Hampshire? Nice job. Well done. Yeah. So, sometimes on the news you hear about owls getting stuck in the grills of trucks and cars. There was a great horned owl, I think it was in Florida, that traveled 15 miles stuck in the grill of a car, and it survived. But this particular owl showed up under the hood. Was the car going in for an oil change?
Yeah, Pep Boys.
Pep Boys. Yeah, Pep Boys opened the hood, and there was a screech owl under the hood. Yeah. It's like, what are you running in that car? Oh, I'm running a screech owl under the hood. Yeah.
Well, one more thing before we go on to the next owl. If you look at how thick the feathers are on most of the owls, and what if I told you that her body underneath there isn't much bigger around than my arm? How much does she weigh? Any guesses?
What do you think in the blue? Way back.
Young lady. What'd you say?
She didn't say anything yet. How many? 5 pounds? Reasonable guess. Too much. What do you think in the way back over there? You say 1 pound? Okay, we have a range now. It's between 1 and 5. 1 is too low.
2.
What do you think? 3 is too high. It's like bingo. Yes, in the orange? 2 pounds. Now the interesting thing is her boyfriend only weighs 1 pound and a quarter. So in the world of owls, the females are bigger, heavier, stronger. So if you see a pair of owls, the larger one is almost always the female. And that's true with hawks and eagles as well. Larger ones are females. Yes?
So regarding the fact that they eat mice, if you throw out of your window of your car gum or apples or trash that then attracts the mice, that's how the owls get hit. Sometimes.
Well, he's saying that if you throw out garbage out your car window, food,
Gum.
that the mice will eat it and attract owls. That's a small part of it. But I think also as a big part is that these roads run right through owl habitat. So owls cross roads a lot. Here in New England we have a lot of roads. And they can't help but cross roads when they're hunting. So I don't think they're always grabbing mice just on the shoulders. Certainly it does happen. So I think that's a small part of it. But I think often they're just flying across the road and they get whacked. They're not even necessarily, zeroed in on a mouse. They just happen to be there when a car is coming by. In fact, some birds of prey will hunt along roads looking for car-struck animals. I was over at the Arnold Arboretum and several years ago, and I saw this red-tailed hawk fly down to a squirrel that had been pancaked by a truck. I mean, it was only this thick. And the red-tailed hawk picked up the pancake and flew off with it. And it was weird to see this flat flying squirrel being grabbed by a red-tailed hawk. All right. Let's watch her for a second.
Okay, let's greet her.
Can you all do what she's doing? Do the barn owl rock, make her feel at home. She's dancing, yeah. She's actually listening and watching the room.
Yep, she's looking at the fans. So this is a barn owl, not a barred owl like you just met.
B-A-R-N.
Right, so they look totally different, don't they?
Like a monkey.
And she's tall and skinny, she has short feathers, she has bare feet, and they're not really found this far north.
This would be a rare bird in this area. Now, if you want to see one, go down south. They're more common in places like Florida, Texas, California. But here in Massachusetts, it's on the endangered list. And in this state, the best place to probably see them is either Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket. But here on the mainland, they're pretty rare. They may have formerly nested this far north, but lately there haven't been too many reports of them nesting. They used to nest under the bridge on Route 1 in Newburyport, and that was many decades ago. And now they seem to be mostly have disappeared from this area as a nester. And this is a spooky owl, because if you go into a cave or an old building, they're not going to hoot at you, they're going to hiss at you or scream at you. They hiss and scream. That's what they do. They don't hoot. So let's all try the hiss, Marcia. Try that.
Try that.
So if you hear that in a cave, or an old barn, or an old building, you're hearing a barn owl. Now, they get hit by cars a lot too. And they're also vulnerable to being poisoned by rodenticides. And they typically live in grasslands or open lands, not so much the forest. A lot of farmers, if they don't use a lot of heavy pesticides, will have barn owls around their farm. I was out in Napa in California back in July in a vineyard. Some of you might have had a glass of wine from this vineyard. And the farmers out there are now encouraging barn owls to nest in the vineyard to control gophers and mice, which damage the roots of the grapevines. So rather than use harsh chemicals, they put up owl boxes in the vineyards. That one night in the vineyard, I had 15 barn owls out hunting over the grapevines. It was an amazing sight. So enjoy that wine. You can probably thank the barn owls for having a hand in producing it without harsh chemicals. Question here.
The two owls were very different looking. How would you describe the way that their feathers feel?
Well, their feathers are pretty soft for most owls. And you don't want to step in the bird poop there, sweetie. Okay, I gotta wipe that up. Marcia, can you describe how the feathers feel?
Right. The feathers are very, very soft. However, the wing feathers are stiff, of course, and owls have silent flight. But barred owls live in places that usually get pretty cold at one time of the year or another. Barn owls are found in warmer climates. They're found around the world, except for Antarctica. They're found in more tropical regions.
Or, yeah, more temperate than New England.
Right.
New England gets pretty cold. I mean, we were down below zero here for several days recently, and that wouldn't be so good for a barn owl. They wouldn't do well handling that. So you're wondering, how do our birds survive those temperatures? Well, they live outside, and we put heating pads in their roosting box. So their roosting box is sheltered from the wind, and it has a heat source, and that helps them endure the cold weather. All of our birds live outside. Now, this owl was hatched in a zoo, and it's imprinted on people. So it was raised by people. So in its head, it probably either thinks you're an owl, or she's a person, or something in between. Now, before you tuck her away, let's take a look at her chest. See that gold color? That tells us that this is a female. Most owls, you can't tell the gender, but with owls, it's pretty, with barn owls, it's easy. Females have the gold. Males would be all white with dark spots, no gold. Girls have the gold when it comes to barn owls. Yes?
What's the face?
The face?
It looks like a monkey.
Looks like a monkey. In fact, one of the old names is monkey-faced owl. And it's a heart-shaped face with a deep facial disc. And notice that she has dark eyes, as does the barred owl. It's the only two owls in the east that have dark eyes. So when you see an owl, try to notice the eye color. It'll help you identify it right away. Thank you.
Hey, question right here. What about the black spots? Well, when you look at a hunter, you've got to think, okay, those spots are going to help that hunter blend in so that what the hunter's trying to catch won't notice that they're there. So what would the barn owl blend in with? Any
She's not
ideas?
usually found in the forest, so what would she blend in with?
What do you think?
Some kind of leaf.
Some kind of
Or
leaves.
brown grasses.
How about grasses or
Yeah.
hay?
A lot of times they'll sit on the ground in a field. You won't even notice them.
Or salt marsh?
Yeah. Birch tree, maybe, sometimes. Yeah, but you don't typically find them in the woods. What were you going to say? Maybe against the night sky, yeah, that's a good point. With a light belly, it would blend in with a light sky, so that's a good point. They're camouflaged with the sky to some degree. All right, we're gonna meet our biggest resident owl here in this area. This is the great horned owl.
Oh, Mark,
Oh, nice pellet.
got a present for you.
That would take a blue ribbon at the Topsfield Fair. That's a nice one. So the great horned owl is not a migratory owl. They're found here year-round. And guess what? They're getting ready to lay their eggs. They lay their eggs in the month of February. So it's the first bird to nest. Boy, he just laid a big egg. Yeah.
And they have what we call horns, but are those bony horns up there? No. Are they ears? No. His ears are on the sides of his head. Now, sometimes the great horned owl is called the tiger of the woods. And you can see the beautiful tiger-like markings underneath his wings. And look at the size of his feet. They can squeeze with 300 pounds pressure per square inch. Really long talons. Now, they can have any pitch to their voice, but it's a 4-note call. So one, you have this side of the room do the low call, which I'll teach you, and then this side of the room can do the high call. Use my voice first.
I think you're going to lose your connection to the heavens there.
Okay. Over here. And then maybe back in the woods you might hear a higher one.
The higher one.
Over here. And then maybe the lower one would answer back.
Nice.
All right, yeah.
So this is the time of year you'd expect to hear that. Anybody hearing them in their neighborhood? Look at all the hands.
We are too.
So this is like their courtship period right now, and they're getting ready to lay those eggs. Now they don't build a nest. They use the old stick nest of another bird, like a great blue heron, or a red-tailed hawk, or a crow. Sometimes they'll nest in the crotch of a tree. That's kind of atypical. Typically they use a big stick nest that's already built by another bird. In this area we have great blue herons that nest in dead pine trees. Oftentimes a great blue heron nest will have a great horned owl in it nesting before the herons come back. So it's a good thing to check if you know of any heron nests. Use your binoculars, you might see a set of ear tufts sticking up out of that nest. All right, question here, let's listen.
They're nocturnal.
Yes, they are nocturnal. Sometimes when they have babies, they can hunt during the day too. And what do we call it when it's opposite of nocturnal? What's that called? Diurnal. Very good. What grade are you in? What grade? What grade are you in? Kindergarten. You knew the word diurnal. How impressed is that? That's very good.
Now, the American kestrel was diurnal.
Right? Almost any owl can be diurnal if they have babies and they're really hard pressed to feed them. I've seen barred owls hunting during the day. I've seen barn owls hunting during the day if there's babies in the nest. Question there on the aisle. Marsha, behind you.
Do we have to trim their talons? Yes, we do.
We use a dog nail clipper to trim the talons, and then I have to sometimes trim the beak. And for that, I use a high-speed grinder called a Dremel tool, and the owl doesn't like it, but it doesn't hurt the owl. It just vibrates their head, so they don't like it. So Marsha holds the bird, and I'm the bad guy that holds the Dremel tool, and I shape the beak. Because in captivity, they don't wear them down as quickly as they would in the wild. And we don't want the beak and talons to overgrow. Yes?
Do all owls, how far can they turn their head?
How far can owls turn their heads? Well, if you start front and center, most owls can turn their head 3/4 of a circle in each direction, for a total of 1.5 circles of continuous movement.
There he's looking right over his back.
How far can you turn your head without moving your shoulders? How much of a circle? About half, right? Half a circle if you go both ways. They have extra neck bones that help them accomplish this. They have 14 neck bones. You and I have 7. So those extra bones give them that extra turning power. But What do you notice about the bird's eyes? Can the owl roll its eyes left and right, up and down? Its eyes are always looking straight ahead. It can't move its eyes. So, it has to turn its whole head to look left or right. It can't just roll its eyes like you do. And their eyes are kind of tubular shaped, and they're big. They're really big, so they gather a lot of light in dusk and low light situations. Question here.
I forgot.
Brain freeze. Yeah, I hate when that happens. All right, question back here. I'm going to get a couple questions on the mic. Excuse me, young lady. Question over here.
How did you get the owl?
Well, this owl came to us from the Blue Hills Trailside Museum in Milton. And do you want to take the story from there?
Yeah, he fell out of his nest in the Blue Hills up in Chickatawbut, and one of the forest rangers found him on the ground, and he was only a few weeks old. He had broken his right wing, and so they brought him into Blue Hills Trailside Museum, which is a Mass Audubon sanctuary, and they also do wildlife rehab there. And they bandaged up the wing, and after it healed, they gave him a flight test, and he didn't do so well. So at that point, they realized that he wasn't a strong enough flyer to be able to make it on his own, and we were able to adopt him. So he is almost 11 years old. He probably hatched in the month of late February or March.
All right, question here.
Can I really turn the head all the way around?
Well, it depends where you start from, right? So if you start front and center and you let the owl turn its head 3/4 and start there, they can go a circle and a half. So they can go over 360 depending where you started from. Question here.
How do you free the owls?
How do we
Free the owls.
free the owls? You mean let them go? Well, this owl won't be freed because he doesn't fly well enough to be freed. He will live with us his whole life. And he can live to be 50. And how old is he again?
He's almost 11. But that's a stipulation of our state and federal licenses, is that they all have to be unable to be released, so they can't survive on their own. So
Marsha, I'm going to make my way to another question here.
back to the peanut gallery back there.
Yeah, question here.
What does it hide in mostly? And what does it hide in when it
Where do they hide? Is that what you're asking? I'm not sure what you're saying. Like where would you see one hiding? Yeah, these owls typically sit in really thick trees with needles. So like a thick pine tree, or sometimes they sit in spruce trees. And they're really camouflaged. If you look at the back of this bird,
Yeah, look at the
it
back.
looks a lot like tree bark, particularly pine tree bark. And it would blend right in. If it's sitting up in a pine tree, you would probably not even notice it. So they're hard to spot, but you often will hear them before you see them. Question here.
Explain in the years, huh? Isn't one year a little higher than the other?
That's true on some owls. On great horns, they're about the same, but on other owls, they're asymmetric, as you point out. So it depends on which type of owl we're talking about. A lot of the northern owls, like great gray owl and boreal owl and hawk owl, have asymmetric ears, and a lot of our local owls tend to be more symmetrical. I think barn owl is slightly asymmetric on its ears. Question here?
Can they have different color eyes?
They're all yellow on this guy, on this type of owl. But different types of owls can be different colors. As you saw, like the barred owl look like black or dark brown. Anybody on this side that I'm missing? Yes. Do owls blink? Yes, they do blink. Although he can't blink his left eye because his upper eyelid stopped working. It's stuck in the up position. So to blink, he has to bring his lower eyelid up. And we're not quite sure what's going on. He went to an ophthalmologist. He doesn't know what's going on. We think when he fell out of the tree, he might have bonked his head, and it might have caused some damage and some issues. So we're not sure. But you'll notice he never blinks that left eye using the upper eyelid. Yes? Is that how big the owl can get? Yeah, and here's how it works. Once a bird can fly, that's as big as they're going to be their whole life. He could fly when he was 6 or 7 weeks old. Well, if he hadn't broken his wing, that is.
Right.
Yeah. So imagine if you were full grown when you were 6 weeks old.
Girls?
That'd be pretty
I need
wild.
you to sit down in one spot.
Yeah.
And stay there, please.
Okay, you can't have you on stage.
Yeah.
Okay, question here.
Can you tell what kind of gender it is?
Yeah, it's hard. She's wondering, how do you tell male from female? With this bird, we're basing it on the weight. A big female might weigh 5 pounds. He weighs, what, about 3?
Right.
So, we don't know for sure. We haven't had a blood test done
Right.
for DNA, but normally the weight range can tell you if it's a male or female. Now, of course, if you see an owl in the woods, you can't weigh it. It's kind of hard to do. But if you see a pair together, the larger one is almost always the female. And you can kind of, with a little practice, get pretty good at seeing small differences in size.
Now, I've got a question for all of you before we move on. Is that fur or feathers on his toes?
Looks like fur.
Birds have fur? They're feathers. They're
What
very-
class of animals has fur? Mammals. Are we mammals? Yeah, we have fur. Some of us have less than others like me, but yeah, we have fur. All right, I saw her hand up in the back. Who had a question back there? Way over there. Use your outdoor voice so I can hear you. I missed part of it. How long? How far can they fly? Well, a great horned owl doesn't migrate, but it hunts in the night. It might fly several miles in a night. A snowy owl that you're about to meet, when it migrates, it can fly hundreds of miles. In fact, one of them showed up in Honolulu, Hawaii, and that's 2,000 miles from land. And it may have hitched a ride on a ship. We don't know. But snowy owls can fly long distances at great altitude. There was an airline pilot that saw one fly by the jet at 9,000 feet. So they can really fly long distances. We feed them every night. Well, some of them get 2 or 3 mice a night, and they'll eat them over the course of the night. So here's a bird that some of you might be seeing this winter. If you've been up to Plum Island, or Salisbury, or Rye, or Hampton, they've been seeing owls along the coast this winter, snowy owls. And this is not a bird that stays here year-round. They only show up starting in November, usually.
Look at his beautiful wings.
And they stay here through March. They typically leave in March or April to head back to the Arctic, where they nest. Now, this bird was hatched in captivity, so he is imprinted.